The rain was relentless that night. Not a soft drizzle, but a pounding storm that swallowed the world in sheets of water. I was driving down a rural highway, the kind where miles pass without a single streetlight or house in sight. My wipers worked furiously, but no matter how fast they swiped, the rain blurred everything beyond a few feet ahead. It was close to midnight, and I was already on edge from the storm. The thunder rattled the car every few minutes, flashes of lightning throwing the empty road into stark relief before plunging it back into darkness. My phone had no signal. The GPS froze miles ago, and the gas gauge was hovering just above empty. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was a trick of the rain, just a dark shape by the roadside. But as my headlights swept across him, I realized it was a man. He stood perfectly still on the shoulder, soaked head to toe, his head covered by a hood. His arms hung stiffly at his sides, and he was facing the road, facing me. I slowed instinctively. Out there, in that storm, he had to be freezing, maybe stranded, maybe injured. But as I got closer, dread prickled across my skin. Something was wrong. His hood shadowed his face completely, but I could feel his eyes on me, locked, unblinking. And even as my car approached, he didn't raise a hand. He didn't signal. He just stood there, waiting. I eased past him, every nerve in my body screaming not to stop. For a moment, I breathed easier, telling myself I did the right thing. But then, another flash of lightning, and I saw him again, ahead of me, standing by the roadside the exact same way. Hood up, head turned toward me, waiting. My hands clenched the wheel. I slammed the brakes, tires skidding on wet asphalt. My heart thundered as I stared at him, illuminated by my headlights. There was no way he could have gotten ahead of me. I'd just passed him. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. The storm howled, my wipers screeched, and for one terrifying second, I considered throwing the car in reverse and fleeing. But before I could, his head tilted slowly, too slowly, like his neck was resisting. And then he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It stretched too wide, the corners of his mouth tearing into something grotesque. Even from the car, I could see the gleam of too many teeth. I hit the gas, flying past him, my chest tight with terror. The car fishtailed on the slick road, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. The rain battered harder, thunder shaking the world around me. I drove blind, desperate, until the fuel light began to blink. My stomach dropped. There was no way I'd make it much further. Up ahead, through the storm, I saw a light, a glowing neon sign, a gas station. Relief surged through me. I pulled in, tires hissing against the wet pavement, and parked by the pump. The station was eerily empty, the building dark except for the faint neon buzz. I stepped out, rain soaking me instantly, and fumbled with the pump. My hands shook so badly I could barely fit the nozzle. That's when I felt it. A presence. I looked up, and across the lot, under the awning, stood the hooded man, closer now, watching. My throat closed. I dropped the nozzle and sprinted into the station, slamming the door behind me. The inside was dimly lit, shelves half empty, the air stale. No clerk, no customers, just the faint hum of a refrigerator somewhere in the back. I pressed against the glass, peering out. The rain blurred everything, but I could still make him out. Standing by the pump, motionless. I grabbed my phone, praying for signal. Nothing. Dead. That's when I heard it. The sound of wet footsteps inside. I spun. The aisles stretched empty, shadows deep between the shelves. The footsteps came again, closer this time, squelching as though someone was dripping water onto the linoleum. "Hello?" I whispered, voice shaking. Silence. I edged backward, eyes darting between the aisles. A flicker of movement caught my eye near the mirror by the restroom door. I froze. He was there. Not in the room, inside the reflection. His hooded figure stood in the mirror, grinning, teeth gleaming wet. But when I turned to look, the space in front of it was empty. My breath hitched. I backed toward the exit, refusing to blink. The reflection moved, tilting its head. And then it raised its hand and pressed it against the glass. The mirror cracked. I bolted out into the storm, sprinting for my car. The man was gone from the lot, but I didn't stop. I slammed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and tore out of there, tires screaming against the flooded pavement. I drove for hours, fueled by pure terror, until the rain finally eased and the dawn broke across the horizon. When I pulled into a diner off the interstate, I was shaking, exhausted. I stumbled inside, collapsed into a booth, and begged the waitress for coffee. She gave me a strange look. "You okay, honey?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed bitterly, but when she set the mug down, I froze. In the window beside me, reflected in the glass, was the hooded man, grinning, closer than ever. The storm was so bad that night, I could barely see the yellow lines on the road. The rain pounded so hard it felt like my windshield might cave in at any second, and the thunder shook the car until I thought the engine would give out. I was already 2 hours behind schedule, tired and desperate for somewhere, anywhere, to stop for the night. That's when I saw it. A flickering neon sign glowing through the sheets of rain. Rest Haven Motel. The kind of place you'd normally drive right past without a second thought. Paint peeling, half the letters burned out, and a parking lot swallowed by weeds. But in that storm, it felt like salvation. I pulled in and parked near the office. The rain drenched me in seconds as I dashed to the door. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of mildew and cigarettes. The clerk behind the counter looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were glassy, his skin pale, and his voice flat when he asked how long I'd be staying. "Just the night," I said, handing over cash. He slid me a key without another word. Old-fashioned brass with the number 6 engraved on it. I hauled my bag back out through the rain and found room 6 halfway down the row. The paint was cracked, the door swollen from years of weather. When I pushed inside, the room smelled of damp carpet and stale air. But I didn't care. It was dry. It had a bed, and that was all I needed. I showered quickly, the water lukewarm at best, then collapsed onto the mattress. The storm raged outside, wind howling against the thin walls. Exhaustion pulled at me, and soon I drifted into a restless sleep. Sometime in the night, I woke. Not from the thunder, not from the rain, from a sound inside the room. A dripping, steady, slow. Drip, drip, drip. I sat up, heart thudding. The bathroom door was cracked open, shadows shifting inside. The sound was coming from there. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept to the door. Pushing it open, I scanned the room. The sink was dry. The shower wasn't running. The floor was clean. But the mirror was wet. Water streaked down its surface as though someone had just splashed it. But when I touched it, my fingers came away dry. I stepped back, pulse racing. That's when I noticed something else. In the reflection behind me, the bed was empty. I spun. My bag was there. The sheets rumpled where I'd been lying. But the me in the mirror wasn't. I dropped my phone in shock. The light skittered across the tiles, plunging half the room into shadow. I scrambled to grab it. And when I lifted it again, the mirror was clear. Just me, pale and shaking, staring back. I told myself I was overtired. Hallucinating. Stress, maybe. I crawled back into bed, pulled the covers tight, and tried to ignore the pounding storm. But then I heard it again. Not dripping this time. Breathing. right beside me, slow, heavy, wet. I froze. My body screamed to move, but I couldn't. My throat tightened as the sound drew closer, like someone leaning over me in the dark. I snapped on my phone light. No one there. But the sheets beside me were soaked. Not with rainwater. Thick, dark, metallic-smelling wetness that spread across the mattress. Blood. I jumped out of bed, stumbling backward toward the door. My shaking hands clawed at the knob, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. Jammed. Behind me, the bathroom door creaked open. Slow. Groaning. And in the glow of my phone, I saw a figure step out. A man. Or what used to be one. His skin was pale, waterlogged, chunks of hair plastered to his face. His clothes clung to him like he'd just crawled out of a river. His eyes were clouded, his mouth slack, water dribbling down his chin. He took one dragging step toward me, then another. The sound of his soggy shoes squelching on the carpet filled the room. "Help me," he gurgled, his voice bubbling like it came from underwater. I screamed, throwing my weight against the door until finally it gave way. I spilled out into the rain, bolting across the lot barefoot. My phone slipped from my grip, disappearing into a puddle, but I didn't dare stop. I sprinted to the office, slamming through the door. The clerk looked up slowly, unfazed. "There's someone in my room," I gasped. "He's drenched, bleeding," he tried. The clerk just shook his head, his eyes dull and empty, fixed on me. "There's no room 6, he said flatly. I froze. My hand shook as I held up the brass key. The number was still there, etched clear as day. 6. But when I looked back, out the window at the row of doors, there was a gap where my room had been. 5, then 7. 6 didn't exist. The clerk's lips curled into something that might have been a smile or a sneer. "Some folks don't leave this place," he murmured, "even when they drown." I didn't wait to hear more. I tore out into the rain, jumped in my car, and drove like hell until the motel was nothing but a blur in the storm. By morning, when I finally reached another town, I pulled into a diner and tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, stress, maybe a nightmare that bled into reality. But when I dug into my pocket for change to pay for coffee, something cold and heavy pressed against my fingers. The brass key, room 6. The rain had been following me for hours, chasing me down the highway like a living thing. Sheets of water hammered the roof of my car, the wipers struggling to keep up as I drove deeper into the night. I was alone on the road, no headlights ahead, no taillights behind. Just me, the storm, and the endless stretch of black asphalt cutting through the woods. It was past midnight, and I was running on fumes, both in my car and in my body. My eyelids felt like they were made of lead. I kept telling myself I'd pull over at the next gas station or rest stop, but none ever came. Just trees. Miles and miles of dark, dripping trees. Then, through the rain-streaked windshield, I saw her. A figure by the side of the road, a woman standing in the downpour, soaked from head to toe. She wore a white dress, clinging to her frame like a second skin, her hair plastered across her face. She didn't wave, didn't stick out her thumb. She just stood there staring at me as my headlights swept over her. Something inside me screamed not to stop. Every instinct told me to keep driving. But guilt is a powerful thing, and the thought of leaving someone stranded in weather like this was unbearable. Before I could stop myself, I was pulling over. I rolled down the passenger window, rain spraying inside. "Are you okay? Do you need a ride?" She didn't answer, just nodded once. I unlocked the door, and she slid in without a word. Water dripped from her dress, pooling on the seat, her wet hair plastering against the glass. The cold hit me instantly. like the temperature had dropped 20 degrees the moment she entered. I forced a smile. Rough night, huh? Silence. Where are you headed? Still nothing. She just stared straight ahead, her face hidden behind that curtain of wet hair. I swallowed, hands tightening on the wheel, and eased back onto the road. The storm seemed even louder now, every raindrop like a hammer against the roof. The car smelled of damp earth, like she'd just crawled out of a riverbank. I tried again. My name's Daniel. You? Her head turned slowly. Too slowly, until she was looking at me. My stomach flipped. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and her lips were bloodless. But it was her eyes that froze me. They were glassy, unfocused, like they belonged to someone who wasn't really there. And then, in the faint glow of the dashboard, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Her seatbelt wasn't wet. Her dress was soaked, her hair dripping, water pooling at her feet. But the fabric where the belt crossed her chest was bone dry. I tried not to look, tried to focus on the road, but my hands were trembling on the wheel. Finally, in a voice that was barely more than a whisper, she spoke. Do you know where you're going? I almost jumped. The words were so soft I thought I imagined them. I'm heading north, into town. Do you need me to drop you somewhere? Her lips parted, slowly. You shouldn't be on this road. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? But she didn't answer, just turned her face back toward the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. I drove in silence, my heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to pull over and let her out. But something told me that would be worse, that I needed to keep driving. After what felt like forever, a sign loomed out of the rain. Bridge out, detour ahead. I slowed, squinting through the storm. The road curved sharply left, orange barricades flashing in the headlights. But the woman beside me shook her head. Keep going. Her voice was firmer this time, though still soft. I swallowed hard. The bridge is out. She turned her face toward me again, hair sliding across her pale cheek. And then she smiled, a small, knowing smile. Keep going. I slammed the brakes, the car skidding on the slick pavement. My heart pounded as the tires screamed, stopping just short of the barricades. I sat there shaking, rain drumming against the windshield, thunder cracking overhead. When I finally turned to look at her, the seat was empty. The puddle of water on the seat, the dripping dress, the smell of damp earth, gone. The car was bone dry. My hands trembled on the wheel as I leaned forward, staring out at the barricades. Beyond them, through the flashes of lightning, I saw the broken skeleton of the bridge. The entire center had collapsed, nothing but a gaping maw of black water below. If I'd listened to her, if I'd kept going, I would have driven straight into it. I sat there until dawn, too shaken to move, the rain finally easing into a gray morning drizzle. When I reached the next town and told the gas station attendant what happened, his face went pale. You saw her, he said quietly. Who? The woman in white. And they say she drowned on that bridge 20 years ago when her car went over in a storm. Folks pick her up sometimes on nights like this. She warns them, but she can't leave that stretch of road. Not until someone joins her. I stared at him, my stomach sinking. Joins her? He nodded slowly. You're lucky she let you go. Even now, I can't shake the thought. That smile, the way she told me to keep going. Like maybe this time she didn't want to warn me. Maybe she wanted me to stay with her. Forever. It was past midnight, and the rain had been falling for hours in relentless sheets. I was staying in a small cabin on the outskirts of a national park. My plan was a weekend escape from the city, a little solitude, some peace. But the weather had other ideas. I sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a towel, fresh from the shower, listening to the storm. Wind whipped through the trees and rain hammered the roof like 1,000 tiny fists. Thunder rumbled in the distance, shaking the cabin's walls. I should have felt cozy, tucked away from the world, but instead, I felt uneasy. It started with a soft tap at the window. At first, I thought it was a branch flailing in the wind. The cabin had an old wooden frame, and the trees pressed close to the wall, so it wasn't unusual for a storm to make the place feel alive. But the tap came again, this time louder, more deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. My heart jumped into my throat. The window was old, single-pane glass, right at eye level from the bed. I slowly stood and crept toward it, my bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The rain blurred the outside world, but I could make out a figure standing just beyond the glass. I blinked. It looked like a man or someone in a coat, but the way he stood was unnaturally still, shoulder to shoulder with the window frame, head tilted slightly, watching. I stepped back instinctively, heart hammering, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the shadows. But then the knocking started again, 3 sharp raps in quick succession, like someone demanding I open the window. I backed toward the bed, shaking, trying to calm myself. My mind raced. This is a cabin in the middle of nowhere. Nobody should be here. It must be a prankster, or maybe someone stranded in the storm. But something about the figure chilled me, something inhuman about the way it moved, or rather, didn't move. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was a branch or a pile of wet leaves falling against the glass. I decided to ignore it. Then came the whisper, a faint, raspy voice almost drowned in the storm. "Let me in." I froze. My pulse raced so fast I could hear it in my ears. I whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. The knocking came again, harder this time, and with it the window rattled violently. My hands flew to my head. I ran to the other side of the cabin, trying to think. The door was locked, I was alone, and the storm cut off any hope of help. My phone had no signal, and the flashlight function barely penetrated the darkness. I had no choice. I had to confront whatever it was or hide. I grabbed the heaviest object in reach, an iron pan from the kitchen counter, and crept back toward the window. The figure hadn't moved, still pressed against the glass, head cocked unnaturally to one side. The rain poured down, dripping from the eaves, streaking its form in ghostly lines. The whisper came again. "Let me in." I swallowed hard. "Go away," I shouted, my voice shaking. The figure pressed its face to the glass. That's when I saw it. Its eyes. Wide, black, endless, almost hollow, and staring straight into mine. The pane between us vibrated with the pounding rain, but I swear I could feel its breath against my skin. And then it smiled. Not a friendly smile, a slow, stretching, unnatural grin that made my stomach turn. I dropped the pan in terror, and it didn't stop there. The knocking escalated into pounding, the glass rattling like it would shatter. I stumbled backward, tripping over the rug, and landed hard on the floor. My head hit the edge of the bed, dazing me, and when I looked up, it was gone. Silence. The storm continued outside, but the figure had vanished, or so I thought. I sat frozen, trying to catch my breath, when I heard it again. Not from outside, but inside. A soft, wet tapping, coming from the back corner of the cabin. I turned slowly. The shadows pooled in the far corner near the fireplace. My heart pounded like a drum. There was nothing there, until I noticed a faint glimmer, like a reflection. And in that reflection, I saw it again. The face at the window. Only now it was inside the cabin, standing silently behind a chair. I gasped, stumbling backward, my hands scrabbling for something, anything, to defend myself. "Who are you?" I croaked, voice barely audible over the storm. The answer didn't come in words. It came in movement. The figure leaned forward, too fast, too smooth, then paused, watching me, tilting its head in that same unnatural way. Its smile widened. I scrambled to the door, yanking it open, rain immediately soaking me, cold water running down my neck. The figure didn't follow, at least not outside. The night was empty, the trees bending in the wind, the storm roaring in the distance. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely close the door behind me. I spent the rest of the night huddled in the corner, flashlight pressed to my chest, praying for sunrise. Every tap, every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Every shadow a figure pressed against the glass. When morning finally came, the storm had passed. Sunlight broke through low clouds and the world seemed peaceful again. I left the cabin immediately, not daring to look back. It should have ended there. But weeks later, I was home, sitting in my living room, when I felt a sudden cold draft on my neck. I turned slowly. My window was closed. The blinds were drawn. But for just a moment, in the reflection of the glass, I saw it. The pale face, eyes black as tar, that same wide, impossible smile. I don't know how it got there. I don't know why it's following me. All I know is that every rainy night now, when the wind howls and the raindrops hammer against the glass, I hear it. Knocking, tapping, whispering. And I know one day it's not just going to tap anymore. It's going to come in. And when it does, I don't know if I'll be able to stop it.